Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh. Just wanted to share something that we've been reading recently, which is Vara by Bhai Gurdas Ji. And we purchased this from the Turiya charity website. Vara by Bhai Gurdas Ji was said by Guru Arjan Dev Ji to be the kunji or the key to the whole of the Guru Granth Sahib Ji. And this particular version has an English translation by Dr. Jodh Singh. The Pauri we wanted to share is Var 5, Pauri 16, and it talks about the woman. So obviously this is something that interests us, and I wanted to know a bit more about the role of the woman in Sikhi. So I'm just going to summarise. So it talks about how a girl is loved dearly by her parents, and admired by her siblings and adored by her grandparents. Then when the time comes for her to get married, lots of money is spent on her. Even within her in-laws' house, she has a respected position, and her husband looks after her, all of her needs. And then finally it goes on to say, from a temporal and spiritual point of view, woman is half man's body and assists to the door of deliverance. She assuredly brings happiness to the virtuous. So some of the things that stand out there is obviously it's talking about a woman with lots of love and respect, which at the time wouldn't necessarily have been the case. There was a lot of GurMat or female infanticide where children were killed, and it's also quite a big issue in India at the moment. And it talks about a lot of respect, which is still an issue now as well, where women aren't treated respectfully. So even in terms of her in-laws and her husband, they're treating her respectfully, and obviously that goes both ways from her as well, and it's something that we can apply to our daily lives as well. But it also goes on to talk about spiritual and temporal point of view, and this is something where women were kind of excluded before, but this is saying that she's equally spiritual and can actually assist everybody else. The words used are marg dhanvaad, so she can actually be the door to liberation for the people around her, and she can bring happiness. So that's kind of the surface interpretations that we got from the English translation. But it's also useful to look at the Gurmukhi, and even though I don't understand most of the words there, some of them I do understand and they do stand out. But you get a whole kind of new perspective on what the body's talking about, and there's so much more to it, there's so many more layers to it when you try to understand the Gurmukhi version of it. So one of the things that we've used to help us in this understanding is another book that we purchased from the Turiya charity website, which is the khoj. So this is highly recommended. It's an encyclopedia, kind of like a dictionary, and it contains every single word within the whole of the Gurbani with an English translation. So, I mean, you can pick any bhangti out and you can look up every single individual word, and it kind of helps aid in your understanding and clarity on what the translations mean, because often the English translations aren't correct. And it's not always a case of whether this is correct or that's incorrect. It's a lot to do with your understanding and where you are in your journey, but I would definitely recommend it. It helps a lot in trying to understand what the bhangti actually means, because a lot of the time we read it but we don't really understand it. So one of the things that stood out in this body for me was where it talks about woman is half man's body. Like, what does that mean? It could be just from my upbringing in this country, and the whole equal rights thing, where I'm thinking, why is woman half man's body? Why is she only half? Even though we often say my other half. But even then, what does that actually mean? What does half man's body actually mean? So we use the khoj to actually look up the words. So the words used here are arad sariri. So arad does mean half, and sariri we presume means body. But what we actually found in the khoj is another translation, which is soul, or a more appropriate word might be atma. So half the atma. And this kind of brought the bhangti to mind that we used to see on wedding cards quite a lot, where it talks about they're not said to be husband and wife who merely sit together, but rather they're one light in two bodies. I think the actual Bhakti is Ek Jot Doe Murti Tan Fir Keiye Soe. So it's talking about one light in two bodies. And this isn't just something that we can use as an analogy for husband and wife, but also our relationship with Paramatma and kind of the merging of our Atma with Paramatma. So it just adds a whole new level to our understanding of it. And what we later realised was the actual title was not just the woman. It says Suhagan de Roop Vich Gursik. So it's actually an analogy of Suhagan de Roop, so the image of the bride as a Gursik. So it's not just talking about how a Gursik girl should be brought up. It's also using it as an analogy of what a Gursik should be like. So a Gursik should be full of gun and gyan, should be full of virtues and knowledge, and should serve as the Mokhtawari, as a door to liberation for the people around them. And we can also put this in context of what the next body is, and it talks about Manmukh as a prostitute. So it talks about how, as opposed to the woman which is well respected, she ruins, the prostitute ruins and disgraces everybody's reputations. She behaves like a boat of stone which drowns its passengers. And even in the context of the body before that, it talks about the difference between Gurmukh and Manmukh as well, and how the life of the Gurmukh is the sacred tank of liberation, whereas the Manmukh goes on suffering. So I guess what we learned from this is kind of the different levels of how you can take a body, whether it's by Gurdas Ji's Vara or a Gurbani Bhakti, and how there's so many more layers to it than just what's on the surface. And the English translation doesn't always do justice to it, but we can use things like the Mahan Khoj to help aid in our understanding. And also just kind of taking time to reflect upon the meaning. What does it actually mean? We can read the words, but do we truly understand it? And once we do understand it, can we apply it to our life? So with this Bhakti, it's talking about a lot of love and respect as a woman. So are we giving that out as a woman? Are we receiving it? But also as a Gursik, we often want to change the people around us and want them to be more spiritually inclined, for example. But are they getting that from us as well? Are we serving as their door to liberation? And are we serving as, it says, Gurmukhi Sukh Phala Nichao Nari. So it's saying that the Gurmukh can actually get the fruit of happiness through the Nari, through the woman. So are we that for our family, for our siblings, our parents, our in-laws, our husband, our children? And it's something that we can aspire to be. And also it gives us the chance to think of that relationship in terms of the Creator, so in terms of Paramatma. So there's a lot of things to think about. This is just our interpretation. There's so many different layers and levels to it. But we just wanted to share that with everyone. Pulchuk maaf karni. Vaheguru ji ka khalsa, Vaheguru ji ki fateh.